Welcome back to the front porch. I guess it was about 10 years ago that I had a dream, or perhaps you might call it a vision, or as my spiritual director colleagues refer to them, a religious experience. Whatever it was, it had a profound effect on me in those days and has come back to the forefront of my memory in these days. I found myself in the midst of a desert, alone, sitting atop a horse, totally wiped out. If you know the sculpture by Remington, The End of the Trail, that was the picture. Bent over the neck of the horse, my bones dry and aching, hopeless, being clean cut off. The tank was empty. There was nothing left to give. There was no going on. I was done. And then off in the distance, I began to hear a rattling. Out of sight, down the valley, it grew louder and louder. Something was happening. As I began to look down the valley, I saw a great cloud of dust. And soon there emerged a mighty army. And what was strange about this army is that it had no leader. And my first thought was, no problem. I'm more than qualified. I will take the lead. But as I ran around trying to find the right liturgical vestments to go with such a task, the army swept on by in a great cloud of dust, leaving me coughing, bones brittle and dry, hopeless, and cut off, empty, and alone. As I looked around, I noticed that I wasn't quite alone. Off in the distance, there appeared to be a figure wandering the desert. I went to inquire. As I got closer, I noticed that he was dressed in rags, not exactly the kind of company I was used to keeping. But it was company, and so I followed at a distance, just out of sight. I wanted to learn more about this man before I approached him. He was peculiar in his behavior. Every so often, he would stop and help someone in need by the side of the road. Sometimes he would bring them food. Sometimes he would bandage up their wounds. Sometimes he would heal an infirmity. The longer I followed him, the more curious I got, and eventually I built up the courage to approach him. He was bent over a particularly critically wounded person. I asked if I could be of assistance. He handed me a towel. Wash his wounds. As he handed me the towel, I realized that he too was wounded, for his hands bore the distinct marks of nails. It was at that moment when I realized who he was that he disappeared from sight, leaving me holding the towel. It is easy these days, now working on 2 weeks of isolation, fear, emotional anxiety, to feel tired deep to our bones, to be afraid, to feel hopeless and helpless, to be clean cut off from the world. No amount of Zoom meetings or conference calls or emails or Facebook posts can begin to touch the isolation that is now creeping deep into our bones. These are the same words that were used by Ezekiel to describe the people in Babylon. When they cried to the Lord, "O Lord, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are clean cut off." It was a vision that Ezekiel had of a valley of dry bones. And when God inquired if these bones would ever live again, Ezekiel said, "Only you know." When he pressed God on what he should do, God said, "Speak to the bones. Remind them that they are not hopeless or helpless. They are not clean cut off, but I am with them. Even in the midst of their exile, even in the midst of their isolation, I am there. And I will always be there, walking with them. The days ahead still are uncertain for us. We don't know what will be required of us, but we can rest with the assurance that we will not be alone in it. That God continues to surround us with that virtual community. He still gives his presence in the midst of our darkness and in our isolation, binding us to one another and to the world in his love and in his care. Even in these days of our rattly bones, he hands us the towel to wash our hands and to care for those around us as best we can. For even now, I can hear the bones rattling as God prepares us for a new and exciting day. Amen.